Kind of Blue, Fides de Kilimanjaro, In a Silent Way. And then perhaps the most prolific recording period in Miles Davis's life, the purely electric period that had actually started with Fides de Kilimanjaro and intensified through In a Silent Way and made a big smash somewhere around 1970 after an exile for a while with an offering we know as Bitches Brew. Completely groundbreaking. Album cover art was like, whoa. Yeah, I actually have this thing. I have all of this stuff. All of it. Because it was Miles. And although I was kind of like, it's electric stuff, man, I can't really, but it was still Miles. So I bought it and I listened to it anyway, because it was Miles. And although he was speaking in a new voice and a new language, so to speak, I could still hear the old Miles. I could still hear the blues in everything he did. And although his hair was different and his dress was different, and you know, he didn't have Herbie and Wayne and Tony and, you know, those guys with him. And although I didn't recognize most of the musicians who he did have with him, and they were playing instruments that were more customary in rock than jazz, it was still Miles. So when many people turned and walked away, I listened anyway. Especially the Bitches Brew. That was just a lot of very interesting concepts. And to be honest, some amazing playing. Especially some of the interplays that's taking place between the musicians. It was largely unstructured, not so heavily orchestrated as his earlier stuff. He had been very modal with In a Silent Way. This was not modal, really. Counterharmonic, maybe. Bluesy, yes. With a backbeat sometimes. High electric, yes. So I remember the Jack Johnson album coming out, and the cover art once again is Jack with a mink on his convertible automobile, probably a big Cadillac or something, whatever was the biggest thing you could buy in those days. And I'm like, Miles, tell us about this cat Jack Johnson. And of course I knew Miles was a boxer himself, so I could understand his affinity for Jack Johnson. And Jack Johnson was a very controversial figure in American history. And Miles is a very controversial figure in American history. And so I'm like, okay, this makes sense, I can deal with this. And then it was like on the corner with the drawings of the young ladies that were, how shall we say, well endowed and, let's just say, clothed in a way to reveal their endowments. I was like, okay, and I understand this is Miles, and I know that he's like that, so yeah, I can see it. It's a scene, it's on the corner, things are popping, people walking around with, you know, boom boxes on their shoulders and stuff, and Miles is trying to catch the pulse of the people on the corner. Miles was always trying to catch the pulse of the people back in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and here we are right here in the 70s, and he's doing it again on the corner. Yeah, I got it. Get up. Okay, here we go, I got it. And then some live stuff. You know, especially that Live Evil, I have that one as well, and it is live and it is evil. There's some sinister stuff in there. The thing is, you didn't recognize a lot of musicians Miles was using, because these are all guys who played electronic instruments, and we jazz musicians didn't know who these guys were. Now they probably had followings here and there, and and were probably known in other genres, but for Miles to have them, we were like, well, who are these guys? Well, we forget that he brought a 17-year-old Tony Williams in too. Yeah, we forget that, don't we? We forget how Miles would go out and discover cats. We forget that Miles was only 17 when he played with Charlie Parker. He was a nobody too, so he knows what it is to recruit not a name, but a sound. So these musicians he was surrounding himself with were not the names of the day. Did he use some great names of the day? Yeah. You know, Bitches Brew, you got, you know, Chick Corea and Joe Zawinul and Herbie and all, you got cats in there. But once he started doing these live things, he had to have his own band, not studio cats, because you see, when Miles started doing it in a silent way and he started doing Bitches Brew and all that, he also became the incubator for a whole movement of fusion. Out of that Bitches Brew came John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Out of that came Herbie Hancock and all of his electronic things, M1 Dishi and that great pop hit Rocket and all that. Out of that came Chick Corea and his Return to Forever and the great Al Di Meola, and Tony Williams had started a group called Lifetime that actually introduced John McLaughlin to Miles Davis. So it was not strange to me that a lot of musicians that were being used, Michael Henderson, people like that, were people I did not know, because I had been following Miles for a long time. And I knew what his journey was, and I knew he was always the talent scout. I knew that he put Cannonball Adderley in his group within 1 month after Cannonball showed up in New York. And Cannonball, he wasn't nobody until Miles Davis made him somebody in name. Now, Cannonball was a bad cat, but he didn't have that name. This is the point I'm trying to make. Miles did not need name musicians. He needed musicians with a certain sound that fit into his vision of what he wanted to do musically, or what people could stimulate him to do musically. It was a collaborative effort. And he was so prolific in this period between 1970 and 1975, 76 in there. So prolific, just side after side. And a lot of these albums were double albums, man. There were 4 sides here. You know, so Miles is recording a lot of stuff with a lot of different people. A lot of different musicians are coming in and out of his groups. And all those influences are working. And Miles is being enriched by it. And then all of a sudden, there he is again. He's in pain, he's dealing with it, and before you know it, he has a drug dependency again. And he's depressed because once again, he's sick. And so, once again, Miles Davis walks away in one of his most prolific periods of all. His electric period. And he was also getting a lot of controversy. I wonder how that felt on his heart, that people were beating him up because he was just being himself. I wonder what that felt like. And he was trying to be what he always had been, the guy who does something different, the explorer, the avant-garde, the pathfinder. I wonder how it felt to have his fans turn on him. I tell you, it probably hurt, but he was also at this point playing for larger audiences than ever before. Isle of Wight, Fillmore, East and West. Live albums, both places, by the way. Yeah, he was wider acceptance. And he was bringing this music to a whole new generation of people who may have been rockers, but now they're doing something more sophisticated, because no matter what you think about Miles in this electric period, his music is sophisticated. Chick Corea may have done what he did, but it wasn't what Miles did. Herbie may have done what he did, but it wasn't what Miles did. John McLaughlin may have done what he did, but it wasn't what Miles did. Only Miles could do what Miles did. But here we are in this period, and Miles leaves the stage again for 6 long years. And when he comes back, he gets into it slowly. But for me, one of the great things that happens is he meets a young musician, composer, band leader, and bass player named Marcus Miller. And he does that album, Tutu. We dealt with Desmond Tutu. He has the great song of Mandela that deals with Nelson Mandela, and he's caught up again in this whole thing of racism, but this time about the apartheid in South Africa. I remember him being asked why he didn't go there and play, and I remember his word, "If I went there to play, and I walked out on stage, and I put my horn to my mouth, not a single note would come out because my heart could not play for those racists." That was Miles Davis. And Marcus Miller helped him speak that truth through his music. And we grooved to it, and we celebrated, and soon the walls of apartheid fell. Thank you, Miles, for giving us the score and the soundscape to end one of the most horrific racial systems in the world. And thank you, Marcus Miller, for inspiring the great Miles Davis one last time, because that came out somewhere around 86, a few more collaborations, a couple of really nice albums, recording of a couple of pop tunes treated very well in the Miles Davis way. They were very popular, very, actually, good music. And then I saw him here in Clearwater in 1988. At Ruth Eckerd Hall. It was obvious that he was beginning to fade. And 1991, Miles Davis exits the stage for the last time. And this journey, I went from 1946 with Charlie Parker at 17 to this final chapter in this electric period. It was so controversial, ending with the great work he did with Marcus Miller and others near the end. It's a testament to the human spirit, how many times this guy got beat down in so many ways, physically, emotionally, how many times he was sick. Sometimes he made himself sick. I got it. But sick is sick. And how many times he was able to get up and fight his way back and still make great music and still create something new. And this last period, even though he took a 6-year break, is still one of the most prolific periods of recording in his life, as if he knew his time was short, he had a lot to say, and so he said as much as he could, as quickly as he could, with many people around him as he could gather. Thank you, Miles, for such a brilliant career and for all of this great music. And I will stand here and say that those of us who threw rocks at him in his 70s need to go back and listen again. And perhaps you will hear what you didn't hear when you were not listening with a clear ear and a clear heart. Thank you, Dark Prince of Jazz.